When you walk into a room where he's surrounded by other women, it's easy to feel like you have to compete, like you need to stand out by being louder, funnier, more charming, more flirtatious. You start calculating who's here, who's prettier, who's wearing something bolder. It's human nature, but here's the secret that most people overlook. The woman who wins his attention long term is not the one trying to impress. It's the one who knows she doesn't have to. Most people operate from a scarcity mindset. They think, if I don't act quickly, if I don't make a move, if I don't show him everything I have right now, I'll lose him to someone else. That mindset leads to desperation, and desperation, even when it's disguised as confidence, is something people can feel. It creates a subtle pressure, and pressure repels. Not just men, people. We don't like being around someone who feels like they have something to prove. But when you walk into the room and you don't try to take the spotlight, when you're relaxed in who you are, when you're present, instead of performing, that's when people lean in. That's when he leans in. There's a massive difference between showing interest and trying to gain approval. When you're genuinely connected to yourself, when you're curious, open and grounded, your energy becomes calm, and calm energy in a room full of people who are trying too hard. That's powerful. That's magnetic. Think about this. How many times have you tried to connect with someone by being extra funny or overly agreeable? Maybe you thought being accommodating would make him like you. But the result? You left feeling like you gave too much and got very little in return, because it wasn't a connection, it was a performance. Real connection doesn't come from proving, it comes from revealing. You don't need to show up and be the most impressive. You need to show up and be the most you. That means letting someone see your calm, your thoughtful, your sense of humor that isn't rehearsed, your values, not because you're announcing them, but because you live by them. When someone asks you about your life, your passions, your weekend plans, speak from your truth, not from what you think will make you more likable. The more you try to impress someone, the more you move away from yourself. And ironically, the more you move away from yourself, the less attractive you become. Not because you're not amazing, but because you're now acting from a place that isn't grounded. You're disconnected. And when someone is disconnected from themselves, it's hard for others to connect with them. But when you stop trying to win, you become incredibly powerful. When your vibe says, I'm here because I like myself, and if you want to be part of my world, you have to add to it. You're no longer one of many. You're in a category of your own. You don't need to fake confidence. You build it by actually believing that what you bring is valuable, that your peace, your energy, your standards, your laughter, your calm, all of it matters, and not everyone gets access to that. When you really believe that, you don't need to compete. You already know what you offer, and you also know that someone either sees it or they don't, and if they don't, they're not your person. A woman who doesn't compete becomes unforgettable, not because she tries to be, but because her energy is different. She's not scanning the room for attention. She's not worried about who's talking to him. She's focused on how she feels. Does she feel safe here? Does she enjoy this conversation? Is she being treated with presence, with respect, with warmth? And this is where connection happens, in the mutual experience, not in the one-sided effort to be chosen. When you're competing, you're thinking, how can I be better than them? When you're connecting, you're thinking, how do I feel in this moment with this person? That shift from external to internal is everything. Because here's the truth. You don't want to be with someone who chooses you because you were the most entertaining option that night. You want someone who sees you, not your performance, not your image. And that kind of recognition only comes when you're not trying to be chosen. It takes courage to stop performing. It takes courage to sit in your authenticity, to risk someone not liking the real you. But it also creates the only kind of connection that's real, the kind that grows, the kind that lasts. It's not about being passive, it's about being aligned. You can absolutely express interest, you can flirt, you can laugh and connect, but it's all coming from a place of wholeness, not from anxiety, not from needing him to validate you. When you stop competing, you also stop seeking constant reassurance. You no longer need to know what he thinks of you every minute, because you're no longer in this from a place of fear. You're in it from a place of curiosity. Is this person right for me? That's the key. When your focus shifts to what you want, how you feel, you become more attractive instantly, not because you're playing hard to get, but because your energy says, I'm already whole. You're welcome to join me. but I'm not waiting for you to make me feel enough. That's the energy that sets you apart from 1,000 other options. You're not trying to rise above them. You're not trying to be better than anyone else. You're just not trying at all in the way they are. You're simply being yourself, being present, being open, but most importantly, being selective. And that's what makes someone stop scrolling through the options. That's what makes him stop and say, wait, who is she? Not because you shouted, not because you sparkled, but because you were still, because you weren't chasing anything. You were just fully in your own lane, letting the right person catch up. When you connect instead of compete, you don't need to fear other women. You don't need to track every text or decode every silence. You already know, if he's right, he'll show up. Not because you proved yourself, but because you didn't have to. Most people never realize just how much power they hand over the moment they keep showing up for someone who isn't choosing them. Every time you answer a late text, rearrange your plans for someone who doesn't prioritize you, or justify being treated like an afterthought, you're sending a silent message. You don't have to choose me for me to stick around. And that message, though unspoken, is loud. Being unavailable to someone who isn't choosing you isn't about playing hard to get. It's not about games, silence, or punishing someone. It's about alignment. It's about making sure your energy, your time, and your emotional investment are going to someone who is present, not just when it's convenient, but consistently, because interest isn't enough. Words aren't enough. You're not looking for maybe. You're not trying to be someone's backup plan. You're not a placeholder. There's this belief that if you just hang in there long enough, if you just prove how patient and loving and loyal you are, the other person will eventually wake up and realize how amazing you've been all along. But here's the truth. If they haven't chosen you by now, they probably never will. And the longer you stay, the more you teach them that they don't have to choose you, because you're already there, waiting, hoping, settling. What you allow continue. So when you allow someone to be inconsistent with you, to pop in and out, to treat you like an option, to withhold clarity, they will, not because they're cruel, but because you're enabling it, and your presence without their commitment removes their need to ever commit. Think about this. When someone doesn't choose you, it's not always a reflection of your value, it's a reflection of their clarity, their readiness, or sometimes their character. But when you stay available to them, despite that, now it does become about you, because now you're the one choosing someone who isn't choosing you, and that's a choice that erodes your self-respect over time, no matter how subtle it feels at first. Every time you make space in your heart, your schedule, your thoughts for someone who isn't actively making space for you, you're taking that energy away from someone who you're delaying the moment someone real can come into your life, because you're still emotionally occupied by someone who's halfway in. There's nothing more powerful than quietly removing your energy from someone who is not meeting you where you are. You don't have to make a scene. You don't have to send the long dramatic text explaining how hurt you are. You just stop showing up in places where you're being emotionally starved. That move, that self-respect in action, it's not anger, it's not manipulation, it's just you saying, I'm no longer available for what doesn't serve me. The minute you stop chasing someone who's not choosing you, you reclaim all the power you gave away. Suddenly, you're no longer wondering what they think of you, what they're doing, or when they'll finally step up. You're no longer waiting, you're moving, you're rising, and when you rise you attract someone who's already walking at your level, not someone you have to drag along or wait on. People feel the difference when your energy shifts, when they sense that you're no longer sitting on standby for them, that you're no longer accessible at their convenience. It creates space for truth. Either they'll rise to meet you, or they'll fade, and both outcomes are a win, because both outcomes give you clarity, and clarity is always better than confusion dressed as potential. When someone isn't choosing you, their actions will always speak louder than their words. They'll say they care, they'll say they're confused, they'll say they're just not ready, and those excuses can sound so comforting, because they keep hope alive. But the truth is, if someone wants to be with you, they'll find a way, period. If someone is not trying, they're not confused, they're just not invested enough, and no amount of love or effort on your part can compensate for what someone isn't willing to give. Being unavailable to someone who isn't choosing you means drawing a quiet boundary that says, I know what I deserve, and this isn't it. And that doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean you become cold. It means you care about yourself more. It means you protect your peace instead of trying to win affection that should be freely given. There's a deep confidence in walking away from someone who's not choosing you. Not because they don't matter, but because you do. You stop arguing with reality. You stop romanticizing their potential. You stop living in maybe, and you return to now. Because right now you're worthy of being loved fully. You're worthy of someone who chooses you. Not just in words but in actions. Not just in moments, but consistent. You may feel like you're losing something by walking away, but what you're actually doing is making space for better, for more, for real. Because when you finally stop showing up for the person who keeps you in limbo, you start showing up for yourself, and that shift is everything. That's when your energy changes. That's when your standards become non-negotiable. That's when the wrong people fall away, and the right ones begin to notice. Because people respect what you respect. When you respect yourself enough to say no to confusion, inconsistency, and emotional crumbs, you send a signal. I'm not here to beg for love, I'm here to receive. And the moment you stop trying to be chosen, is the moment someone chooses you. Not because you fought for it, but because you stood still long enough for the right person to see the strength in your stillness. The ones who are never serious, they'll disappear when you stop chasing. The ones who are unsure, they'll stay unsure, and you'll stop needing to fix that, because your peace is worth more than their attention. Your time is worth more than their indecision, and your heart, it's worth more than someone who doesn't know what to do with. Choosing to be unavailable to the wrong energy is one of the most loving things you can do for yourself. You don't owe access to anyone who isn't willing to value it. Let people show you who they are, and then believe them, and then act accordingly, not with bitterness, but with grace, not with resentment, but with self-respect, not with revenge, but with removal. When you master that, you stop chasing people, you stop fighting for space in places that can't hold you, and you finally become available, not just to love, but to the kind of love that sees you, chooses you, and never makes you question your place.
Knowing your worth isn't about walking into a room and announcing how valuable you are. It's not about arrogance, pride, or being above anyone. It's a quiet, calm certainty that lives in your choices. It shows in how you carry yourself, what you tolerate, how you respond when someone disrespects your time, your energy, or your presence. You don't need to talk about it, you live it. Most people are trying to earn love by lowering their standards. They think, if I'm more flexible, if I give more chances, if I don't ask for too much, maybe they'll finally stay. But that mindset doesn't build relationships. It builds resentment, because every time you lower your standards to meet someone where they are, you're stepping further away from where you are meant to be. Setting standards doesn't mean being inflexible or unkind. It means you've taken the time to understand your emotional needs, your values, your vision, and you don't abandon those things just because someone attractive shows up with mixed signals and a charming smile. You don't shrink just to fit into someone else's comfort zone. When you know your worth, your standards are not rules you force on others. They're boundaries that protect your peace. They're the guardrails that make sure you don't spend months or years pouring into someone who only gives you half of what you're giving them. They prevent you from getting stuck in that exhausting cycle of confusion, overthinking, and trying to decode what someone means when they say one thing and do another. And here's the truth most people don't talk about: when someone truly respects you, you don't have to constantly remind them of your standards. You won't need to keep asking for the bare minimum. The right person doesn't feel threatened by your standards. They feel inspired by them, because a person who's serious about building something real wants to rise with you, not drag you down or test how much you'll tolerate. It's not your job to prove you're worth it. You don't have to convince someone to treat you well, to prioritize you, to communicate clearly. That's not something you should earn. It's something that comes naturally when someone values you and when you value yourself enough to walk away from anything less. Think about the last time you accepted behavior that made you feel small, unimportant, or insecure. Maybe they said they'd call and didn't. Maybe they showed up when it was convenient, but disappeared when it mattered. Maybe they flirted with other people in front of you, or gave you just enough attention to keep you around, but never enough to feel safe. And you stayed, hoping, waiting, justifying. But deep down, you felt it, that small voice whispering, "This isn't right. This isn't what I deserve." That voice is your worth trying to speak through the noise. And the longer you ignore it, the more you begin to question it. You start thinking maybe this is all you can expect. Maybe everyone is like this. Maybe love is just supposed to be this confusing and painful, but that's not the truth. That's what happens when your standards get buried under your fear of being alone. Knowing your worth means you're not afraid to be alone, because you'd rather be single than in a relationship where you constantly have to beg for the basics. You'd rather wait than settle. You'd rather be at peace than be in chaos with someone who doesn't value your presence. This doesn't mean you need to be perfect. It doesn't mean you always get it right. We all make compromises. We all have moments where we question ourselves, where we let things slide, where we love someone who doesn't love us the same way. But the difference is, when you truly know your worth, you notice, you catch yourself, you course correct. And eventually, you stop staying too long in places that diminish you. When someone comes into your life, they're not just seeing you, they're observing what you allow. They're reading the signals you give off. Are you the person who says one thing but accepts another? Or are you the person who lives your truth, even when it's hard? That alignment between what you say and what you do, that's what tells people whether they need to rise or whether they can stay comfortable and still keep you. Standards don't chase people away, they filter. And that's a beautiful thing. You don't need everyone to want you, you just need the right person to recognize your value. And when your standards are clear, it becomes obvious to the wrong ones that they either need to grow up or move on. That saves you time, heartbreak, and emotional exhaustion. You also need to know this. Setting a standard doesn't guarantee someone will meet it. And that's okay, because your job isn't to make someone meet your needs. Your job is to communicate them clearly and then pay attention to whether their actions align. If they don't, you don't argue, you don't plead. You don't twist yourself into someone you're not. You step back, you let go, you move forward. Knowing your worth also means being able to receive. It means allowing someone to show up for you, support you, love you fully, without trying to earn it by being less difficult or easier to love. You don't tone yourself down for love. You don't apologize for having needs. You don't pretend you're okay with casual when you know you want commitment. That honesty, that courage to be real about what you want. That's what keeps your standards from being performative and makes them deeply personal. You are not asking for too much. You are asking the wrong person, or asking at the wrong time. And that distinction matters. Because the moment you start believing your desires are a burden, you start settling for crumbs, and you forget you were made for more. It might feel hard at first. You might miss people. You might have moments of doubt. You might get tempted to reach out, to bend, to hope they'll change. But stay grounded. The person who truly sees your worth will not need to be reminded of it over and over. They'll know, and they'll act accordingly, not perfectly but consistent. That's what you deserve. Not just love, but aligned love. Not just attention, but intentionality. Not just promises, but follow through. And it all begins with you, with the decision to stop lowering your bar in hopes someone else will rise. Because when you rise first, the rest becomes clear. The wrong ones will fade. The right ones will match your pace. And you'll never again have to beg for what you should have been given freely. Attracting by being whole is one of the most misunderstood ideas in dating and relationships. People often think they need to be perfect, put together, emotionally flawless to be seen as whole. But being whole isn't about never feeling lonely, never needing connection or never desiring love. It's about being rooted in your identity first, not someone else's attention. It's the ability to stand in your life, proud of who you are, regardless of whether someone is standing beside you. You don't need someone to complete you. That narrative is a trap. The moment you look to someone to fill in the gaps of your self-worth, you begin to hand over control. You start needing their approval to feel attractive, needing their attention to feel valued, needing their commitment to feel secure. And the second they pull away, even slightly, your world begins to shake. Not because they're your whole world, but because they've become your emotional anchor. But when you're whole, no one becomes your anchor. They become your addition. You've already built the foundation. Your confidence, your passions, your values, your peace. All of that exists with or without someone in your life. That's the energy that makes people stop and take notice. Because it's rare, it's powerful. It says, I'd love to share my world with someone, but I don't need them to be my world. And here's the paradox. The less you need someone to validate your worth, the more people are drawn to you. Because your energy feels different. There's no desperation. There's no proving. There's no anxiety around will they stay, or am I enough? There's just a calm, steady presence that says, I know who I am. I know what I bring. And if we're aligned, let's build. If we're not, I wish you well. That presence is magnetic. It creates curiosity. It makes someone want to understand what you have that so few others seem to. It's not loud. It's not flashy. It's not forced. It's rooted. And being around someone who's rooted makes others feel safe. Not because you're emotionally invincible, but because you don't put your emotional well-being entirely in someone else's hands. Most people go into relationships from a place of lack. They think, if I just find the right person, I'll finally feel whole. And in the beginning, it works. The attention, the excitement, the novelty, it feels like healing. But over time, the cracks start to show. Because you didn't build from wholeness, you built from a wound. And no matter how amazing the other person is, they can't fill a space that only you can fill from within. When you attract from wholeness, you attract differently. You're not drawn to people who confuse you, keep you guessing, or trigger your insecurity. You're not chasing after validation. You're observing behavior. You're listening to your intuition. You're asking, does this feel safe, consistent, and real? Instead of, how do I make them like me more? This shift changes everything. You stop waiting for text messages to define your mood. You stop building stories about potential instead of paying attention to patterns. You start investing your time where there's mutual energy, effort, and respect. Not because you're jaded, but because you've done the work. You know what it feels like to be at peace, and you're not willing to trade that peace for chaos disguised as passion. There's also something incredibly powerful about a person who has a full life, not busy for the sake of being busy, but genuinely filled with people, projects, routines, and passions that light them up. That kind of life creates depth. It gives you something to talk about that isn't centered around who's texting you or where the relationship is going. It creates a dynamic where the other person isn't the sole source of your happiness, but a beautiful extension of it. When you live like that, your time becomes more valuable, not in a transactional way, but in an intentional one. You're not just giving your attention to whoever asks for it. You're choosing based on how someone makes you feel, how they show up, and whether they align with the life you're already building. That selectiveness isn't arrogance, it's self-awareness. And it makes the right people lean in harder, because they can sense that being part of your life is a privilege, not a guarantee. Being whole doesn't mean you never struggle or never feel vulnerable. It means that even in those moments, you don't abandon yourself. You don't betray your standard. You don't pretend to be okay with something that hurts you just to keep someone around. You don't contort yourself to become more digestible. You show up as you are, knowing that the right connection won't require you to become someone else to earn love. This isn't about being emotionally unavailable or overly independent. Wholeness includes the ability to receive love, to let someone in, to be supported, but it's done from a place of choice, not desperation. You're not saying, please love me so I can feel whole. You're saying, I already feel whole. Let's see if our wholeness can complement each other. And when two people come together from that space, the relationship isn't built on fear. It's not about constantly proving love or securing commitment. It's about growth, exploration, expansion. It becomes a safe place where both people can be seen fully, not just the curated version designed to keep the other person interested. That kind of connection built on wholeness is sustainable, because it's not built on emotional hunger. It's built on mutual nourishment. Each person pours into the other from overflow, not emptiness. So the most important relationship you'll ever work on is the one you have with yourself, because every other connection stems from that. If you haven't done the work to love, respect, and nurture yourself, you'll keep choosing people who mirror your wounds, not your worth. You'll keep confusing chemistry for connection and potential for partnership. But the moment you start choosing yourself, fully, consistently, with love, everything shifts. The people who once held power over you begin to lose their grip. The ones who couldn't meet your needs stop feeling like loss. And the ones who do align with you will see something in you they can't look away from. Not because you tried to be everything, but because you were already everything. That's what it means to attract from wholeness. It's not about perfection. It's about presence, ownership, alignment. And when you live from that space, the love you attract won't feel like a battle. It'll feel like coming home. When you stop competing and start connecting, when you become unavailable to those who won't choose you, when you set standards that reflect your true worth,
when you shift from performing to being present, and when you live from wholeness instead of need, you stop chasing love and start attracting it. The right person doesn't need convincing, chasing, or games. They just need to meet the version of you who already knows she's because when you choose you first, the one who's meant for you won't hesitate to choose you too.